Hi, everyone. I know that so many people have a little bit extra time, and some people really love stories. And since I love telling stories, both from the Bima and in general, I decided to read a short story that I just read yesterday, actually. This book, the book of Jeremiah, came out last year, written by Julie Zuckerman. And it's actually a novel written in short stories. So each short story stands on its own in a certain way. And I want to read you the first story. It's kind of a long story in terms of recordings. So you'd want to settle in and have the time to listen to it if you're interested at all. And of course, each story is related to this character Jeremiah, who the book is named after in that way. This story is the first story of the book. It's called "A Strong Hand and an Outstretched Arm," and it says that it takes place 1938. Ricky's son keeps the live chicken tucked under his arm, giving it a little zest every time the wicked Haman's name is chanted. Ricky flinches with each squawk, but Jeremiah seems unconcerned by his mother's squeamishness. "Relax, what's to be afraid of?" says Ricky's husband. "Leave it to Abe to dream up the Purim costume of a ritual slaughterer for their 11-year-old, arranging with the fowl market in East Bridgeport to borrow the bird for the night." Mottled, tea-colored feathers drift to the floor, and Ricky collects them in tissues so the synagogue won't look like a chicken coop. Looped around Jeremiah's belt is a 6-inch long fake knife made out of plastic, a straight blade with no point at the end. Abe, son of a kosher butcher himself, has declared the imitation to be very close to what a real shochet would use, though the chicken does not seem worried. When the reading is over, everyone shuffles into the social hall for the festive Purim activities. A few ladies shrink back at Jeremiah's chicken, but most people commend the Gerslers for their creativity. Even the synagogue's Hebrew teacher is bemused, shedding his customary exasperation. "A better costume for him you couldn't pick." Ricky offers a tight, uncomfortable smile. She detects an underhanded compliment. The man is not in the habit of heaping praise on her middle child. "A firm hand at home, some discipline is what he needs," the teacher had said only a few weeks ago, following Jeremiah's second or third prank in class. Oy Vezmir, Abe's many good qualities do not include toughness in the discipline department. Now, waiting for the magician and costume contest to begin, Ricky chats with her girlfriends while keeping an eye on her children. Lenny stands off to the side with another gangly 14-year-old, and Ruthie plays clapping games with two friends, all three little girls dressed as Queen Esther, the heroine of tonight's story. Jeremiah is surrounded by a circle of boys, waving their hands in his face. He bounces up and down, organizing the group into a line. An older boy fumbles with something in his pocket and procures 2 coins in exchange for a turn with the chicken. What in the world? Her son checks his wristwatch and, after a minute, signals to the boy that his time is up. With one hand, he reclaims the bird, extending his other palm to the next boy in line. "No," Ricky arrives as the second boy fishes 2 pennies out of his pocket. "We've got to give this chicken back tomorrow, and we can't pass him around. Put your money away." "Ma," Jeremy starts, but his disappointment seems mild. He points to the older boy. "I'm not giving Howie back his money. He already got his turn." She doesn't have to look far to see where he comes up with these cockamamie ideas. Abe, over in the corner with a group of men, seems barely older than a boy himself. A baseball cap in place of his yarmulke. Her husband chuckles whenever she conveys the Hebrew teacher's reports of Jeremiah's mischief-making and his recent insistence their son is becoming a big troublemaker. "So no, he put a caterpillar inside his teacher's yarmulke," Abe asks. "That's a good one." "Poor dear, he's going to give you a heart condition," says her friend Toby, who looks pale and gaunt herself. There's a magician entertaining the younger children, but Jeremiah amuses himself by sneaking up on the unsuspecting girls and making the bird squawk. They squeal, run to their parents, but again Abe says, "What's to be afraid of? That scrawny thing couldn't feed a family of 2. During the costume fashion show, the audience gives hefty applause to a boy dressed as Haman and a girl dressed as the scroll of Esther. To Ricky's surprise, the clapping intensifies when Jeremiah takes his turn. Terrific get up, she hears. The chicken twists and strains as if wanting to escape, and her son makes a show of it, screwing his face into funny expressions. A regular performer, Abe's pals say, patting him on the back. Ricky would like to scurry after Jeremiah to collect the shedding feathers, but Abe holds her back. See how he carries himself in a crowd, Abe whispers, admiring. She wishes her affectionate feelings for Jeremiah would come more naturally. She is nagged by guilt that they don't. She knows she shouldn't compare her boys, but from Lenny she gets nachas, pride in his accomplishments. From Jeremiah, only tsuris, troubles and more troubles. Thank goodness for Ruthie, still sweet and huggable at 5. A hush falls over the crowd as the rabbi announces the results of the costume contest. He proclaims Jeremiah as the overall winner, and the little shochet beams, as if he's just eaten a month's worth of brisket. He bounds up to the stage to collect his prize, holding the chicken over his head in a victory pose. Even at a distance, Ricky recognizes the mischievous gleam in her son's eye. All her alarm bells go off. Jeremiah holds the bird by its neck and raises it above his head. She recites a silent prayer that he won't begin swinging it or fling the poor creature into the crowd. Frowning, the rabbi leans over to whisper something to Jeremiah. At once, the impish grin recedes, and Jeremiah tucks the chicken back under his arm. Ricky is faint with relief, but mortified, her cheeks scarlet. The rabbi obviously senses her son is a troublemaker, and his parents failures. The rabbi laughs. Wrong holiday. Never wasting an educational opportunity, he explains, waving a chicken over the head to atone for sins is performed before Yom Kippur, not Purim. You see, Abe whispers, he knows he hasn't behaved well lately, so he's repenting. Ricky's throat is dry. She's never heard her son express remorse for his mischief. Repent, she asks? I should live so long. Passover follows quickly on the heels of Purim. No sooner is one holiday finished than Ricky must start preparing for the next. She's sitting in Abe's easy chair in their wooden-paneled den, compiling lists of cleaning left, the sneers of local bullies who made a sport of humiliating Jewish boys by pulling down their pants or shoving them into the bushes. Her brother, one of the few who stood up to them and returned their taunts, paid for his wisecracks with blood and bruises. Through the window, she sees it's just an errand boy. Her momentary relief evaporates when she rips open the envelope he's given her. She's been summoned for a meeting with Mr. Pennyford, the headmaster at Jeremiah's elementary school. Her son is a few months away from graduating from 6th grade. Ve'ezmir. An hour later, she is in Mr. Pennyford's office, file cabinets lining the walls, diplomas on display, a dim photograph of an army regiment from the Great War on his desk. Though he's ushered her in and indicated for her to sit, he doesn't speak for several long moments. Ricky's hands shake, her stomach clenches. Mr. Pennyford flips through a yellow pad filled with notes, his lips cheerless and pursed. The headmaster clears his throat and begins reciting a litany of problems. Today's incident, Jeremiah leaving a dead mouse wrapped up in a fancy box on his teacher's desk. Thinking it a gift, she'd opened it and ran screaming out of the classroom. Ricky covers her eyes with her hand, shaking her head in consternation. Mr. Pennyford is not finished. Jeremiah displays no respect for his teacher or any authority. He's becoming a wise mouth. As he reads from his list, her heart sinks with each accusation. He's clever, Mr. Pennyford says. Always does well in his tests, but he's become a problem. A few weeks ago, someone borrowed tools from the janitor's closet and used them to fix the radiators in Jeremiah's classroom, so it was too hot to sit inside. It's taken some investigating, but your son was definitely the main perpetrator. His tone is angry, threatening. That's called vandalism, Mrs. Gerstler. I could have gotten the police involved, you know. What? The floor should open up to swallow her. The police, destruction of school property is unacceptable, a crime, in fact. She is speechless, shaking her head, afraid to ask, what now? A queasy sensation travels from her gut to her throat. She swallows and prays she will not be sick in his office. Mr. Pennyford continues, She should not be surprised to know that he's been forced to whip the boy from time to time. Most boys try to keep this from their parents because they'll get worse beatings at home. She nods at this logic. I guess. I'm sure you do what you have to do. Immediately, she is stricken with guilt. Some kind of mother she is encouraging the whipping of her own son. Consider this a warning. If he doesn't quit this behavior, or if there is any more vandalism, he's out. Should I so much as find his name drawn on a desk with a pencil, I'll send him to Stratford. Tears form in Ricky's eyes, and she tries to blink them back. Underneath her pocketbook, her hands crumple and uncrumple a tissue. Stratford, she asks, her voice a whisper. A special school for delinquents. Mr. Pennyford makes a clucking sound. Delinquents. She doesn't like this harsh English word, which makes her think of junior gangsters. Ricky forces down a mixture of dread and anger at Mr. Pennyford's insinuation. Jeremiah is a bit like her brother Lavish, afraid of no one, always getting into trouble. But a criminal? Impossible. And yet she feels a chill, a speck of doubt. This is what they've struggled for all these years in America, that their son should be a no-goodnik? It would be a real shame for a smart boy like him to have to go to that place, he says. He's a boy is all, she mumbles in protest. She wants to tell Mr. Pennyford that her son is kind-hearted and easygoing like his father. How during the worst of the Depression, Jeremiah befriended the out-of-work tramps on East Main Street and insisted on bringing them holiday leftovers. But her English fails her. Her eyes are blurry. She can no longer hold back her tears. She wipes her face, apologizing. I see this is quite a shock, especially as Leonard never causes any trouble. She nods and wishes for the 1,000th time that Jeremiah would be more like his older brother. Mr. Pennyford offers her a fresh tissue. Her Zadie Wolf was a schoolmaster. How would he have reacted to such behavior from his American-born great-grandson? But he could no more imagine Ricky's life in America than she could know what it had been like to be smuggled out of Russia dressed as a woman to escape the Tsar's army. And would he even recognize her, his own granddaughter, who, soon after she arrived in the country, changed the V in Rifki to a K because it sounded more American? She pictures her little boy in a school for delinquents and remembers that Stratford is where one of the Schlossberg boys had been sent. Instead of mending his ways, the toughs there only pushed him further down a ruinous path of gambling debts, brawls, and who knows what else. The family fled back to Brooklyn in shame. The last she heard, someone had taken up a collection to help the poor parents with legal fees after the boy had been arrested. She gathers her courage. I've just remembered some things about that school. Isn't it a bit extreme what you're proposing based on his offenses? Has he been violent? Mr. Pennyford stands, flipping his legal pad to the front, signaling an end to their meeting. No, but we often see behaviors like this as the first step. See that your husband has a talk with him. Ricky nods at Mr. Pennyford's suggestion, despite her internal skepticism, the voice in her head saying, you should only know. She's beginning to understand, 17 years into her marriage, that Abe's tendency to shy away from conflict is a disastrous flaw in child rearing. She shakes Mr. Pennyford's hand, thanking him for his time. You should live and be well, Mr. Pennyford, but I hope we don't meet again until 6th grade graduation. Abe's late hours, his liquor store open until 10 p.m. most nights, make it difficult for Ricky to have a long discussion with her husband on any matter. And she's heard enough about Abe's own shenanigans as a young boy to know that she has no choice but to handle this herself. It's very serious what you did, breaking that radiator, she tells Jeremiah. Do you understand that? That was just a prank, he says. All the fellows were jazzed up when we had our lessons on the playground. She pictures the scene. 6th grade boys whooping with joy, celebrating her son's sabotage. You can't do that. You just can't. Do you want to go to a school with horrible boys, criminals? Because that's where you're headed, according to Mr. Pennyford. He shrugs and mumbles, fine. Next, Ricky insists he write an apology to his teacher for the dead mouse, but when he hands it to her for examination, the note is so sloppy and insincere she crumples it in disgust. The boy must be taught some respect, be made to feel the consequences of his actions. She marches into his room and scoops up his marbles. No, you can't take them. I can and I will. Start behaving, mister, and then we'll see. But that's my special acro set. Lenny gave them to me. Well, they're mine now. She remembers how proud he'd been when his older brother deemed him a crack marble player, worthy of such a gift. But she announces her conquest with childish triumph. Ricky plans to seek advice from her girlfriends at their weekly card game that evening, but when she arrives, they are preoccupied with more troublesome news. Their friend, Toby Solomon, has been diagnosed with the dread disease, a horrible fate for Toby, Max, and their 3 children. They form a rotation to prepare meals for the family. They will sit with Toby when she's up for visitors. Toby shouldn't fuss with Passover, they agree, so Ricky will host the Solomons for one Seder, and someone else will have them at another. What's 5 more guests when she's cooking for 20? An extra potato kugel, a few more knedlach, a larger brisket. Ricky is glad she hasn't mentioned her summons to the headmaster. She loves her friends, but can easily picture raised eyebrows at her son's behavior. Better she shouldn't give them fodder for tittle-tattle. Later in the week, Lenny reports seeing Jeremiah shove another boy, and Ricky worries that Mr. Pennyford is right. The kind of impulsive behavior her son is exhibiting is only one step away from more aggressive acts. Each time she tries to mend something, her stitches come out uneven and she rips them out. She snaps at Ruthie for spilling juice on her dress. The lilac bushes in their small yard bud and flower, but bring her little comfort this year. She starts an argument with him when he insists he doesn't need to hire extra help in the store. I think you like working long hours. This way you don't have to deal with your family responsibilities. That's enough, Ricky. You want our son should be a no-goodnik like Harry Schlossberg? Genug, he yells, banging his hand on the table to make his point. Enough. Me you're angry at? She tells him he's not doing Jeremiah any favors by slapping him on the back in approval of his pranks, or all his talk of the things he and his friends used to pull on their teacher. The Stratford school is serious business, and she can't shake the comparison with her brother, the wise guy, coming home with blood-stained shirts and once a broken nose. He's a boy, is all, says Abe. Try not to let all the little things bother you so much. Little things, she says, bristling. Listening from the next room, Lenny calls out that he's heard Jeremiah has been running around school halls with an arithmetic book on his head and singing racing songs. Downstairs, Jeremiah, right now. She asks Lenny to join them. Jeremiah adores his older brother, and she hopes he'll be able to talk some sense into him. Mr. Pennyford was very clear, he says, when the 4 of them are gathered around the table. She rests her hands on the gleaming red enamel. If you keep messing around, he'll kick you out. We'll call the police if you vandalize anything again. That was a prank, I told you, Jeremiah turns to his father. A pretty good one, too. Abe is trying to suppress a smile. She darts him a look. Yes, no more vandalism, Abe says. And where did you learn racy songs? Is that a wink he gives his son? Are they smirking? Abe! She waits a beat to see if he has anything to say. And what's this about a fist fight, she starts. Listen here, Jeremiah. Lenny chimes in, trying to take on the role Abe won't, but his inflection is patronizing. You've got to knock it off. Do you want to be known as a screwball? That's what the boys call you. I know you're trying to be funny, but quit it. Hardy har har, says Jeremiah, is fearful of what will come next. She understands, too late, that she shouldn't have included Lenny in the meeting. Jeremiah's idolization of his brother is long dead. Maybe then you'd have a couple more pals yourself, be less of a crumb. She gasps. Lenny does not lunge at him. Either Jeremiah belittles his brother to spite his parents or out of real ill will towards Lenny. She doesn't know. Apologize to your brother, she says. Ricky is certain Abe will demand the same. Son, I hate to do this, but you're leaving me no choice. One more incident and I'll confiscate your comic books and baseball card collection. That's it? Ricky wants to scream. Jeremiah shrugs as if to say, so what? Apologize right now, she repeats. Jeremiah smirks again. Her anger white hot, she reaches across the table and smacks him across the face, toppling over Abe's glass of juice. Sticky orange pulp spills over the enamel surface and streams onto the floor. Ricky! Abe's eyes widen in surprise. What's the matter with you? She yells at her son. Her hand smarts and rings of pain reverberate up her arm. Jeremiah rubs the raw red mark on his cheek, blinking back tears. How can you talk like this? Go to your room. Jeremiah runs from the table, but what leaves her cold is Abe's condemnation. He's frowning, working his jaw. She grabs a rag, wets it, and begins to mop up her mess. Has she gone too far? She tosses the rag in the sink and beckons Lenny for a hug before excusing him. Just ignore him, she whispers. Are you finished now? Abe asks when they're alone. You think this is the right way? Finished? I don't know the right way, but I can't tolerate his behavior. She's at the sink, rinsing the rag and wringing out the extra water with force. Her hand burns. So you smack him? She faces him, seething. You never discipline him. Always I have to be the bad guy. If you wouldn't be such a weak example of a father, he wouldn't pull this shtick. Abe's mouth opens in disbelief. Vehemence in his eyes instead of the usual merry sparkle. Her words are jagged pieces of glass piercing his blown-up sense of Abe the all-around good guy. My father didn't appease. A few times with the belt buckle, and that was enough. A firm hand from his father is what he needs. Everyone says so, and if you won't do it, I'll have to. You want that I should hit him, too? Abe's eyes flash with anger, but his voice remains steady. You're poisoning my relationship with him. No, Ricky, it's not me. He sounds weary, almost sad. But then, maybe what he needs is a mother who reaches out to him, who doesn't lavish praise on one son and not the other. Abe doesn't hurl retaliations often. His words lacerate. For a few moments, they glower at each other, and then Abe stomps off, slamming the back door. Her heart beats wildly, but she forces herself not to give in to the tears stinging the corners of her eyes. She rests her head in her hands. In a moment, she will rise. Passover is coming, and there is much to be done. 25 people counting on her. Her thoughts dart to the Solomons and what will become of Toby's children. Ricky was 8 years old when her own mother died. Her life's most enduring sadness has only grown with the years. Could Ricky have been a different kind of mother if she'd had one on which to model herself? She wipes her hands on her apron and surveys her kitchen. The glare from the sunlight is harsh, illuminating the dust and crumbs in hard-to-reach corners. She chips off a piece of ice from the bottom of the icebox and wraps it in a rag. She finds Jeremiah lying on his bed, his eyes puffy. Here, she says, placing it gingerly on his face. I brought you this. She is ready to stay and explain herself, but Jeremiah squeezes his eyes shut, refusing to look at her. Go away, he says. Just go. 5 days before the holiday, the kitchen is fully koshered, rid of flour and bread and other items that are not permissible on Passover. The everyday and Shabbos dishes are in boxes in the basement, and in their place are the special cookware and plates Ricky will need to prepare the Seder meal. She has wiped down every cabinet and scoured the counters. Sunlight streams into the kitchen at an angle that adds to its shine, and though her arm aches from scrubbing, she takes pride in the accomplishment. A floor you could eat off of, Abe says. Thank goodness his anger is never long-lived. She beams. Jeremiah's behavior has improved since the family conference last week, and she's cautiously optimistic. Her son has stopped snickering when Mr. Pennyford's name is mentioned. Though Abe maintains it's the threat of losing his baseball cards or comic books, Ricky thinks she may have slapped some sense into him. Baby steps towards maturity, she hopes. In the last 2 days before the holiday, she cooks from morning to night. There are never fewer than 3 dishes being prepared simultaneously. Ricky schools Ruthie in peeling vegetables and has her mix the batters for the wine and sponge cakes. The air is thick with the smell of cooked carrots soaking in a honey and raisin sauce, and with the rich, meaty aroma of 3 batches of chicken soup. Ricky ticks off the menu items in her mind and tries to quiet constant worries. Will she have enough food? Her eyes are raw and red from chopping onions, and every so often, she must shake out the palm of her hand, numb from grating potatoes. But these tasks she does lovingly. Despite the backbreaking work, Passover is her favorite holiday. Plus, the preparations are a diversion from Toby, who looked awful when Ricky last visited her. Max, who had dark circles under his eyes, told her what she already suspected. Toby is not responding to the treatments. Now, fully ensconced in her cooking and unable to leave the house, Ricky dispatches Jeremiah to the fishmonger. He is to purchase the carp needed for her gefilte fish, one of her most loved dishes, widely praised at family events. She gives him specific instructions on the size, approximate weight, and color of scales. Within an hour, he's back. Ricky unties the bundle, her nose alerting her before her eyes. I said a carp, not a pike. Ma, I swear I thought that's what he gave me. I gave you specific instructions. I know, sorry, Ma, he says before adding, but can't you use a pike instead? This is true, but she and Abe both prefer the oily tasting carp to the milder pike, and the thought of enduring a lecture by her sister-in-law on the topic is unbearable. Yes, but I needed a carp. Now the fish will have no taste. I'll tell you why he got the pike, Ma, Lenny says, appearing at the door of the kitchen. Because it costs 2 pennies less per pound. I'll bet you a dime he took the change and bought himself some licorice at Finkel's. He looks his brother up and down, nodding. That's about your size. Jeremiah lunges at his brother, shoving him out of the room. Hey, Lenny cries. He shoves back and stands with his fists clenched. Jeremiah! She notices a thin black line around his lips, confirming Lenny's accusation. Is this true? Jeremiah says nothing. Come here, she commands, but he stays rooted to the floor. Don't you know how lucky you are to have a papa who provides for you? This is how you thank us, with lies and stealing? He looks at the ground, his cheeks flushed. Don't you ever think of other people? Look how helpful Ruthie is being, and look how Lenny studies. We're scrimping and saving for him to go to college, and you, selfishly wasting money on candy. Come here. She reaches into his pocket and pulls out a candy wrapper. Soon, she won't be able to do this. He'll be too big and strong. She thinks of her father and of Labish. She doesn't start teaching Jeremiah lessons now, but will be too late. She grabs his arm and turns him around, her right hand raised. Smack, 4 smacks across his tuchus. She heaves with exertion, shots of pain radiating from her hand up to her shoulder. She is about to get the belt strap when she sees Ruthie whimpering in the corner. Her mixing spoon has clattered to the floor. Tears are streaming down her face. She is calling, Mama, Mama, stop. I said I was sorry, he says, sputtering before he sprints out of the room. He returns a few seconds later and throws down 4 pennies on the kitchen floor. There's your change. I didn't raise you to be a liar or a gonoph, mister. I wish you were dying, he yells, running out, like Mrs. Solomon. He doesn't mean it. He can't mean it. She quivers for a moment, but steels herself, blinking several times. No tears. She closes her ears and pretends not to hear a thing. By 4 o'clock on the evening of the holiday, the furniture is rearranged. 2 extra tables extend from the end of the dining room table and into the living room. 25 place settings and wine glasses line the table, along with makeshift paper place cards decorated in crayon by Ruthie. With the cooking complete and Ruthie down for a nap, Ricky sinks into her bed for a few blessed minutes. The aches in her feet and back are immediately soothed. Her mind still races. Tonight they will read the Haggadah, recounting how God redeemed the children of Israel from slavery in Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Ricky and Abe have their own Exodus story, leaving the old country for a better life here. Her children will never be forced to hide in a barn for 3 days during a pogrom. They've been in America almost half their lives, and her appreciation for the country has not waned, though for the first time she wonders if her children are too soft. Perhaps a double dose of determination and gratitude would do Jeremiah some good. The boys know the stories from the shtetl, and here in Bridgeport they've witnessed men panhandling on the sidewalks and hobos lining up for soup kitchens. Surely Jeremiah knows how fortunate he is. He apologized for his outburst the other day, and she doesn't think he'll make problems tonight with the whole family gathered and Abe running the Seder with his usual jollity. In every generation, states the Haggadah, each person must act as if he or she was personally redeemed out of slavery. But Abe always tries to make the Seder fun and memorable for the children. Seders by the Gerstlers start late. Only after Abe returns home from the liquor store. The guests begin arriving at 10 p.m., everyone in their holiday best, and the kitchen bustles with activity. Though Max Solomon and his children are in quiet, somber moods, Toby has put on a bit of rouge and insists she's feeling well enough to help. Ricky's not sure she believes this, but she seats her in the kitchen and tasks her with shelling the hard-boiled eggs. Bowls of salt water are prepared, matzah is placed on the table, and finally, at 11, after Abe is home and changed, they sit down to read the Haggadah. The aroma of the chicken soup emanates from the kitchen, hearty and nourishing, and Ricky thinks it might be the best smell in the world, though they will not arrive at the festive Passover meal until page 17. She sits at one end of the long table closest to the kitchen with Abe and the boys all the way at the opposite end. She is filled with the warmth of her holiday table. She loves their new Maxwell House Haggadahs, the traditional Hebrew text on one side and English translation on the other. A coffee company distributing free Jewish books, only in America. They take turns reciting the passages. Ruthie and the other small children chant the 4 questions beautifully. It's after midnight, but the children are wide awake and engaged in the rituals. Abe asks various guests to get up out of their seats and act out different parts of the story. Those playing Israelites pantomime hauling boulders while others act as their Egyptian taskmasters, standing over them with hands on hips, demanding they work faster, faster. The 3 Gerstler children are Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, leading a group of guests through the parting of the Red Sea. Others are designated to play the roles of the 4 sons, wise, rebellious, simple, and the one who does not know how to ask, and must then answer questions about the Passover story and character. Abe's creativity is a gift. These are the moments Ricky feels blessed. They begin reciting the 10 plagues, dipping their pinkies into their wine glasses and spilling drops of red wine on their plates for each plague: dam, svardeya, kinim, arov, blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, and so on. Each affliction meant to soften Pharaoh's hard heart and convince him to free the slaves. They chant the list by rote. At Abe's end of the table, a sudden commotion. Ricky hears tiny shrieks, then a clapping of hands, then exclamations of, "Oh my God!" People are scrambling up. Ricky several seconds to understand. Several live frogs have been let loose on the Seder table. Frogs! Jumping from plate to plate on Ricky's good Passover dishes. She glowers at Abe. This is too much, but his mouth is dropped open in surprise. A shoebox sits on Jeremiah's plate. He is trying to coax the last one out. "Jeremiah!" Ricky screams. Blood is rushing to her head and she thinks she might pass out. The nerve to unleash vermin in her spotless house, on her dishes. Get them out of here. Her son grins his "Who, me? Look." But then he hops around the table, making a show of catching the frogs. The dark brown spots running down the creatures' backs in 2 neat columns seem almost hand-drawn. And when Ricky catches sight of a fleshy orange underside, she feels a wave of nausea. "Abe, do something!" But he doesn't hear her, not over the shrieks coming from her sisters-in-law and nieces. Ricky knocks over her chair, her face is aflame, scrambling to collect dishes. She tries to hurry down to the other end of the table to implore Jeremiah to grab hold of her boy and shake him. But so many people are out of their seats that she can't move quickly. Jeremiah ducks underneath and around the table and chairs, trying to catch the last frog. He is oblivious to her fury, or perhaps he's anticipated it in advance and is avoiding looking at her. With a sickening feeling, she wonders if he pulled the stunt for the sole purpose of baiting her. The speckled critter jumps in and out of the salt water and proves adept at evading human hands. It lands on cousin Susie's neck, causing her to faint and slump against her husband. The men and boys join in the effort to catch the frog. 2 glasses of wine are knocked over. Red liquid splatters onto the table. Thank goodness she'd put a thick, clear plastic covering over the tablecloths. Ricky grabs the bowl of charoset, lest the frog jump in the mortar of apples, wine, walnuts, and cinnamon. Several other women grab the matzah plates and small dishes of horseradish and celery to protect the ritual items from being spoiled. Ricky feels as if she is floating, detached, watching the scene from above. A few frogs? What's to be afraid of? Did her husband really just say this? Ve'izmir. Susie comes to just as Jeremiah catches the last frog. His breaths come in rapid, heavy gasps, but he is looking to his father, triumphant with his mischief-making. The whole thing may have only taken a few minutes, but Ricky's holiday is ruined. She feels split. She imagines the whipping she will give, pain reverberating in her arm, already palpable. The other part of her propels into action, grabbing every plate touched by a frog. She must scrub every surface. She calls for people to hand her their plates, their glasses, anything that the filthy creatures may have touched. Where had he gotten them from, her little devil? Ricky works mechanically, but through her fog she hears someone, no, a number of people, clapping and laughing. She doesn't understand how this can be until she sees that her husband is leading the applause, the look on his face one of pure pride. Attaboy, Jeremiah, that's the way to make the plagues come alive. Abe turns to his cousin. Come now, Susie, you're fine. Susie nods, though her face is peaked. Abe says to Ricky, you see, she's fine, maybe a glass of water. Though some of the men and boys are heaving with exertion, Ricky can't escape their grins. Max and his kids are smiling for the first time this evening, and even Toby's cheeks are red with merriment. Terrific stunt, they say. Did you see that last guy with the big eyes? He hopped right out of the salt water. I guess he's a freshwater frog. Abe motions for her to sit, but with a sharp shake of the head, she indicates no. If 4 frogs caused such a disruption to our Seder, he says, imagine what those hundreds of frogs would have been like for Paro. Max and Abe laugh so hard, tears rolling down their cheeks. I sincerely hope he's lice on us or locusts, someone says. Susie's cheeks return to their normal hue. The sisters-in-law sit down. Toby's eyes are glistening and gay, and she thanks Jeremiah for the chuckle. Ricky, sit. Her arms are full of plates, and she is making her way back to the kitchen. Abe, with one word, she silences him. He won't try to interfere with her mission to free the dishes from amphibian germs. But when she returns to collect more things, he seems to be looking at her with great sadness. He's always urging her to lighten up, to not worry so much, to relax, to enjoy life. But how could he think that live frogs in their house, in front of their guests, even on one of their guests, is acceptable? And yet, the guests have survived. Lenny is studying his brother with admiration. This will be a Seder to remember, one that is talked about in the family lore. Remember that year Jeremiah brought the frogs? You should keep going, Ricky says to Abe now, indicating the Haggadah. Otherwise, we'll never get to the meal. Her breathing has steadied, and she takes a long look at her son, whose face is flushed with triumph. She can almost see his mind turning and planning stunts for future Seders. Go help your mother, Abe says to Jeremiah, and bring another rag for the wine. Jeremiah scampers in and out of the kitchen doing her bidding. She's sent the other women who've offered to help back to their seats. It was a joke, he says when they're alone. She holds up her hand to stop him. I know. Her voice is firm. The swinging door between the kitchen and the dining room is shut, but she can hear her family and friends carrying on with the Seder. Jeremiah's eyes cloud over as if he knows what's coming. It is loud in the other room. The whimpers of a boy might not be heard. His expression is despondent, similar to the sad look Abe cast her way a few minutes ago. Her son is no longer glowing in triumph or shining with childish excitement because of her. No one else, sisters-in-law excepted perhaps, has taken her son for a no-goodnik, an emerging scoundrel, only Ricky, his own mother. Jeremiah looks at the floor. Sorry, Ma, he says, mumbling to his shoelaces. I thought it would be fun. Sorry if I wrecked your Seder. But it is I who have squelched your delight, she thinks. Was Abe any different as a child? And hadn't she been elated to leave the austerity of her father's house and make her life with someone who knew how to be jovial and make others happy? Early in the marriage, she'd get tearful if she overcooked a brisket or if her cookies came out hard as rocks. But Abe would eat every bite, making funny quips instead of reprimanding for the waste. She grasps his shoulders and he tenses. What does he see in her face? She pulls him to her in an embrace, surprising them both. In reaction, he squeezes her hard, as if he's holding on before parting forever, asking forgiveness for every time he's hurt her. Well, you made Toby and Max laugh, she says into his hair. That's worth something, she knows. She wants so much to protect him, to mold his character into what she thinks is proper. Relax, what's to worry? Abe's voice reverberates in her mind. He's a boy, is all. Please, God, she prays silently, still holding her son. May my arms always be outstretched to my children. She does not want to be cast off in the desert like the older generation of Israelite slaves who lived to see their freedom, but not the promised land. Her son loosens his hold, but she draws him in and clutches him a bit longer. Here it is from the book of Jeremiah, um, Julie Zuckerman. I've read about 4 or 5 of the stories. I really encourage you to take a look at the whole book. And for those who would like and made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the story.